What if I told you the Black Dahlia wasn't the first? That long before Elizabeth Short's body was found, sliced in half, mouth carved ear to ear into a gruesome smile, that there was another killer. One just as twisted, one who may have laid the blueprint for the most infamous unsolved murder in American history. Welcome to Crime Stands Still Deep Cuts. I'm your host, Carrie Drobin. This is the podcast where we dive beneath the headlines and through the shadows of America's darkest unsolved crimes. Today we follow a trail soaked in blood from the back alleys of Los Angeles all the way to the smog-choked industrial skyline of 1930s Cleveland. This is the chilling possibility that the Black Dahlia killer didn't just strike once, that he may have started a decade earlier. Picture this. It's Cleveland, 1935, a city clinging to the edge of the Great Depression. Unemployment, poverty, bootlegging, and in the Kingsbury Run neighborhood, something far worse. Body parts, arms, legs, torsos began washing up in the Cuyahoga River, scattered throughout the city's shantytowns. Some dismembered, some decapitated, some drained of blood. The press dubbed him the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. History remembers him as the Cleveland Torso Murderer. So let me describe Kingsbury Run for you. It's a prehistoric riverbed running from the flats, the area along the Cuyahoga River near Lake Erie, to about East 90th Street. Train and rapid transit tracks still run through the run. Bordered on the north by Woodland Avenue and on the south by Broadway Avenue, Kingsbury Run was a dark, dreary, and dangerous place in the 1930s. It was a wasteland. And it became a dumping ground, not only for the city's refuse, but for its forgotten souls. Drifters, outcasts, broken men, who sought shelter in what was called the hobo jungle. It was a squalid maze of tents, trash, and despair. Survival depended on movement. Most rode the rails, not to chase opportunity, but to outrun the cold, the hunger, the past. Just east of the run lay something called the Roaring Third, a precinct teeming with vice, brothels, gambling, dive bars, flop houses. It was Cleveland's fever dream, where the law turned a blind eye and violence was currency. It was in this grim crucible of poverty and moral decay that Cleveland's most chilling murder case unfolded. A series of ritualistic killings, so grotesque, so calculated, they seemed less like crimes and more like statements. Kingsbury Run wasn't just a backdrop, it was an accomplice. A silent witness to a killer who knew that in a place like this, no one hears the screams. Let me take you back to September 1934. The still waters of Lake Erie gave up a secret. A young man stumbled across what looked like driftwood, or so he thought until he got closer. It was the torso of a woman in her mid-30s, thighs still attached, amputated cleanly at the knees. The body had washed ashore just east of Bratenahl, a quiet lakeside community that would never be the same. The Cuyahoga County coroner A.J. Pierce noted something odd, something that would become a signature. The woman's skin had been treated with a chemical preservative that turned it reddish, tough, almost leathery. A grotesque preservation. Police scoured the area but recovered only a few additional body parts. The woman's head was never found. Her name never learned. She was given a moniker instead, the Lady of the Lake. And for 2 years her death stood alone, unconnected, a horrible anomaly. That changed in 1936. Her remains were retroactively added to a growing list. She became Victim Zero, the prelude to a nightmare. Because no one realized yet was that a killer had already begun to hunt. Fast forward, September 1935, a full year later. 2 teenage boys cut through the weeds near East 49th Street in the ravine known as Kingsbury Run. It was still a neglected stretch of rail yards, garbage fires, and shanty towns. And at the base of a slope locals called Jackass Hill, the boys found a body. A decapitated, emasculated corpse, male, naked except for a pair of socks. The flesh was clean, almost polished. Rope burns circled both wrists, signs he'd been bound. And still, somehow, the cause of death was unmistakable: decapitation, post-mortem. Fingerprint analysis identified him as Edward Andrassy, a 28-year-old white male with ties to the Roaring Third. But the horror didn't end there. As investigators combed the scene, they found a second body nearby, also decapitated, also emasculated. This one had been dead for weeks, decomposing in the summer heat. But there was one uncanny similarity: the same chemical treatment on the skin as the Lady of the Lake. This victim, roughly 40, white, never identified, was already beginning to fade into the dirt. 2 bodies, 2 brutal signatures, and suddenly Cleveland had a serial killer. January 1936. It began with 2 baskets. A woman walking past the Hart Manufacturing building on Central Avenue spotted something strange: 2 half-bushel baskets, casually abandoned near East 20th Street. Inside, wrapped meticulously in newspaper, were parts of a woman's body. Neatly packed, deliberate, like parcels waiting for pickup. 10 days later, the rest of the remains, everything but the head, were recovered in a vacant lot nearby on Orange Avenue. The mutilation was familiar. Like the previous victims, the cause of death was decapitation, post-mortem. But this killer was evolving. The Cuyahoga County coroner, A.J. Pierce, noted something chilling. The killer had waited for rigor mortis to set in before dismembering the body. It was clinical, precise, as if someone were studying death in slow motion. Through fingerprint analysis, police identified her as Florence Polillo, a barmaid and waitress who had once lived on East 32nd Street near Carnegie, right on the fringe of the Roaring Third. Florence was victim number 3. And the killer? He was just getting started. June 1936, Kingsbury Run. 2 boys, out early near the East 55th Street Bridge, stumbled upon a pair of trousers. Inside was a human head. The next day, police found the rest of the man's body discarded in front of the Nickel Plate Railroad Police Building, intact, except for the missing head. Once again, the body had been meticulously cleaned, drained of blood, and decapitated, but this time the victim had clues. 6 distinct tattoos, inked across various parts of his body, a fresh set of fingerprints, but still no name. The media dubbed him the Tattooed Man. And in a desperate bid for answers, authorities took the extraordinary step of creating a plaster death mask of his face. They even built a diagram mapping out the tattoos. The exhibit was displayed at the Great Lakes Exposition, where more than 100,000 visitors passed by his likeness, his blank, unblinking stare, and the silent testimony etched into his skin. Incredibly, no one came forward. He remained anonymous, another ghost in the killer's gallery. To this day, the tattooed man has never been identified. His death mask, along with 3 others from the case, still resides in the Cleveland Police Museum. Artifacts of a city's darkest time. July 1936, a teenage girl cutting through the woods near Clinton Road and Big Creek on Cleveland's west side stumbled onto a nightmare. There, hidden beneath a canopy of leaves and silence, were the decapitated remains of a man, 40, white, left to decompose in the open air. His head was nearby, along with a pile of blood-soaked clothing. But it was the scene itself that chilled investigators. The sheer volume of blood seeping into the earth told them this wasn't a dump site, this was a kill site. He had died where he fell. Victim number 5 was never identified. Another ghost added to the growing roster. September 1936, East 37th Street, Kingsbury Run. A man trying to hop a train tripped over something that wasn't steel or gravel but flesh, the upper half of a male torso. Cleveland police descended on the area. They found a nearby open sewer, a stagnant, reeking pool, and sent a diver in to explore its depths. What emerged was grotesque. The lower torso, severed legs, human remnants drifting through industrial sludge. Word spread fast. Over 600 people crowded around the scene, watching as officers hauled dismembered body parts from the filth, and somewhere in that crowd, the killer might have been watching too. Victim number 6 was estimated to be in his late 20s. He had been executed like the others and decapitated. But the coroner noticed something different this time, something that raised the stakes. There were no hesitation marks. The cuts were surgical, clean, confident. Whoever did this had anatomical knowledge and experience. The victim had likely died the instant his head was removed in one bold, deliberate stroke. He was never identified. Just as an aside, think about how difficult it would be to cut up a body. By fall of 1936, Cleveland was in a full-blown panic. 6 victims, 6 brutal surgical killings in just 1 year. No suspects, no leads, no answers. Can you imagine living in Cleveland at that time with that kind of body count? The city's major papers, the Cleveland Press, the Cleveland News, the Plain Dealer, reported on each discovery, each failure, each fresh body. Headlines screamed of the mad butcher of Kingsbury Run. And the public? They were just terrified. But they were also fascinated, because this killer wasn't just taking lives. He was taking control. Under mounting pressure from Mayor Harold Burton, newly appointed Safety Director Elliot Ness, yes, of the Untouchables, was forced to take a more active role in the case. In response, the coroner convened what the press would chillingly call the Torso Clinic, a closed-door summit of law enforcement, forensic experts, and medical minds tasked with exchanging theories and attempting something radical for the first time: to profile a killer. We take that for granted now, but this was brand new in the late 1930s. It was a face built from shadows, born of mutilation, and in an unprecedented mood, the Cleveland Police Department assigned detectives Peter Murillo and Martin Zalewski to the case full time. The two of them dove headfirst into the city's seedy underworld, Kingsbury Run and the Roaring Third, often going undercover, slipping into character with the same ease the killer shed his victims' identities. By the time the investigation ran its course, both detectives had personally interviewed over 1,500 people. Department-wide, that number soared past 5,000, and it became the largest manhunt in Cleveland's history. It was a citywide obsession that blurred the line between fear and fascination. The November elections brought continuity and change. Harold Burton remained mayor, but Coroner Pierce was replaced by a rising political star named Samuel Gerber. He was young, relentless, already legendary. He brought more than a scalpel to the case. With a law degree in one hand and a medical license in the other, he approached the crime scenes like courtrooms, determined to dissect the truth. February 1937. Another torso surfaced, this time the upper half of a young woman washed ashore east of Brettonall. But something was different. This victim hadn't died by decapitation. That came later, after she was already dead. This suggested a shift in the killer's signature, or a calculated attempt to send a new kind of message. 3 months later, the lower half of her torso appeared near East 30th Street. She was in her mid-20s, no name, no head, no identity. And like so many before her, she was erased. Another chapter in a killer's anatomy lesson. June 1937. Beneath the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge, a teenage boy made a grim discovery: a human skull, bleached. Nearby, a burlap sack lay half buried in the dirt, and inside were the skeletal remains of a petite black woman, estimated to be around 40 years old. Dental records led investigators to a possible name: Rose Wallace, a woman who had lived on Scoville Avenue. Police chased every lead, knocked on doors, retraced her final steps, but like so many before her, Rose disappeared into the void of the killer's design. Her identification was never made official, and her story remained unfinished. By July 1937, tensions were rising across Cleveland's labor force. There were strikes in the flats. They had gotten so volatile that the National Guard was deployed to keep order. One young guardsman stationed near the West 3rd Street Bridge noticed something strange bobbing in the river, what appeared to be flesh trailing behind a tugboat. It was victim number 9. Over the next several days, police pulled nearly the entire body from the Cuyahoga River, except, you guessed it, the head. But this time, the mutilation was even more grotesque. The abdomen had been gutted, the heart removed. It was rage made anatomical. The coroner, Samuel Gerber, believed this marked a turning point, a new brutality in the evolution of our killer. He wasn't just experimenting, he was escalating. The victim, a white male in his mid to late 30s, was never identified. April 1938. A laborer on his way to work spotted something washed up along the banks of the Cuyahoga. At first, he thought it was a dead fish. But as he got closer, he realized he was looking at the lower half of a woman's leg. Victim number 10's first trace. A month later, investigators dredged 2 burlap bags from the river. Inside were the torso severed into parts and most of the remaining leg bones. Her arms were never recovered. Without them, they could not confirm identity. But there was something else. For the first time, Coroner Gerber found traces of narcotics in the victim's system. He speculated, was she an addict? Or had the drugs been used to immobilize her? Was this yet another evolution in the killer's method? Sedate, then butcher? She, too, was never identified. August 1938, a hot, brittle morning in Cleveland, 3 scrap collectors picking through a dump site at East 9th and Lakeside made a gruesome discovery: the torso of a woman, wrapped in layers. First, a man's double-breasted blue blazer, then an old quilt. It was as if the killer were dressing her for burial or display. Nearby, in a recently constructed box, police found the woman's arms and legs swaddled in brown butcher paper and secured with rubber bands. Her head had been wrapped in the same fashion. Coroner Gerber noted something else. Some of the body parts appeared to have been refrigerated, preserved, stored, as if she'd been kept waiting. While officers fanned out to search for more remains, they made another horrifying find: a second body just yards away. 2 mutilated corpses, staged, placed in direct line of sight from Eliot Ness's office window at City Hall. It was a message, a taunt, a challenge. Victims number 11 and 12 were never identified, but the killer had made his point. After years of surgical slaughter, this was no longer about the victims, it was personal. August 1938, it was just after midnight when Eliot Ness made his move. 12:40 a.m. under the cover of darkness, 35 police officers and detectives, escorted by 11 squad cars, 2 police vans, and 3 fire trucks, descended on the heart of Kingsbury Run. Their target? The sprawling homeless encampments tucked behind Public Square, where the Cuyahoga River twisted through a maze of makeshift shelters and rusted-out dreams. The raid was swift. Ness's men swept through the run, corralling 63 transients, men living on the margins, now labeled suspects by proximity. And as dawn broke, police and firemen scoured the now empty shanties for clues. They found none. And then, in a move that shocked the city, Ness ordered the encampments torched. Flames consumed what little the displaced men had. The message was clear: the butcher's playground would burn. The press turned on him. Public confidence wavered. Critics called it a publicity stunt, desperate and futile. They weren't wrong. The fires didn't stop the killings. They didn't reveal the killer. They just left ashes. July 1939, nearly a year later, the city had a suspect. Finally. 52-year-old Frank Dolezal, a Bohemian bricklayer, was arrested by County Sheriff Martin O'Donnell for the murder of Florence Polillo. Dolezal had once lived with her. Investigators later learned he had also had ties to Edward Andrassy and Rose Wallace. A pattern, maybe. But Dolezal's confession was troubling. A fragmented mess, rambling, incoherent, but laced with unsettling precision, as if the details had been handed to him or rehearsed. Before he could stand trial, Dolezal was found dead in his cell. The official story, suicide by hanging, but the math never added up. Dolezal stood 5'8". The hook from which he allegedly hanged himself was 5 feet off the ground. The real question wasn't how he died, but who wanted him silenced. The man Cleveland authorities once paraded as the answer to a city's nightmare died under suspicious circumstances behind bars, his body found hanging 7 feet off the floor. Coroner Sam Goebbels' autopsy told a darker story. 6 broken ribs, all sustained while Dolezal was in the custody of the sheriff's department. Was he tortured? Was the coercion coerced? To this day, almost no one believes Frank Dolezal was the torso killer. He was a scapegoat, a man caught in the crosshairs of a desperate system. Perhaps another victim. The Kingsbury Run murders remain one of the most perplexing and gruesome unsolved cases in American history. The rumors haven't stopped. They've only grown louder with time. But one thing seems certain. Eliot Ness believed he had his killer. And that killer, whoever he was, taunted Ness for years after the killings stopped. All official police records tied to the case were lost or destroyed or quietly removed. The man many believe was responsible was known for decades only as Dr. X. Today, historians and researchers widely believe Dr. X was Francis E. Sweeney, a brilliant, volatile surgeon with a troubled mind. Sweeney lived near Kingsbury Run and had both the medical knowledge and access to facilities that would have made dismemberment easy and clean, almost academic. Ness held him for nearly a week, but no charges were filed. No confession was secured. But soon after Sweeney checked himself into a sanitarium, the murders stopped. Coincidence? Or the end of a reign of terror sealed behind hospital walls? By 1938, the butcher had left at least 12 known victims, maybe more. Most were never identified. Nearly 10 years later in Los Angeles, Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia, would be found in an empty lot, cut in half at the waist, her body meticulously drained and posed. Coincidence? Some experts think not. There are distinct hallmarks in both cases, one former FBI profiler John Douglas remarked. The lack of blood at both scenes suggests they were killed and cleaned somewhere else. There's a chilling similarity in the dismemberment and the display, he said. Douglas isn't alone. Multiple criminologists from Mark Gribben in The Devil's Crossroads to the forensic reconstructionists in the docuseries The Torso Murders, America's Forgotten Ripper, have explored the eerie overlaps. Even Eliot Ness, the famed Prohibition agent who hunted Capone, was drawn into the torso investigation. He died believing the butcher had escaped justice. He taunted us, left a body within sight of his office window. Ness was always one step behind, a ghost. Some believe that ghost didn't vanish, he just changed zip codes. Here are the facts. Both killers of the Black Dahlia and the 12 known victims favored clean surgical dismemberment. Both killed during times of upheaval, economic ruin, wartime tension. Both targeted transient victims, poor people, sex workers. Neither was ever caught. There's even a suspect that some believe they obsess over, and that was Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, a surgeon with severe mental illness, who failed 2 polygraphs during the Cleveland investigation. Ness suspected him, but had no proof. Sweeney was committed but never prosecuted, and after his institutionalization, the killings in Cleveland stopped. So that begs the question, did a new butcher appear in Los Angeles in 1947? Or had Sweeney been released? Had he been transferred? Or someone else inspired by the Cleveland carnage? Crime writer Harold Schechter says that there's a thread of theatricality in both killers. The Black Dahlia's body was deliberately staged. The torso victims left where they'd be found quickly. Both were killers who wanted to be seen. That's what makes this theory so chilling, not just that they may be the same killer, but that whoever did this wanted us to look, wanted us to stare, wanted us to feel powerless. The case files are cold, the suspects are dead, but the patterns remain. Maybe the Black Dahlia wasn't the first. Maybe she was the finale, the encore. Or maybe the killer never stopped. We'll never know for sure if the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run and the Black Dahlia killer were the same, but one thing is certain. They were both writing in blood. If Sweeney were tried today, his mental health would likely be at the center of the prosecution, legally and tactically. He would probably have undergone multiple forensic psychiatric evaluations to determine his competency to stand trial, right? Could he understand the proceedings? Did he know right from wrong at the time of the crimes? Could he assist his defense? The legal outcome he might have faced would have been not guilty by reason of insanity. And if he had been found, NGRI, he would have been confined to a secure psychiatric hospital rather than prison, possibly forever. Some jurisdictions allow guilty but mentally ill, where he's found criminally responsible but receives mental health treatment while serving his sentence. And then there's competency restoration. If you're unfit to stand trial, can you be committed to a psychiatric facility and then restored enough to stand trial? And if it's a death penalty trial, you can sort of see the absurdity of it. If you're restored to competency so that you can be put to death. In 1935, Sweeney passed under the radar because there was no DNA, no behavioral profiling, and limited physical evidence. But today, we would have touch DNA, biological traces from tools, clothing, or bodies, familial DNA. Even if his DNA wasn't in CODIS, there were relatives profiles could link him. There would be digital forensics like GPS, credit card use, social media, license plate readers that could track movements and intent. There would be geographic profiling. Analysts could use victim body dump sites to triangulate his operating area, possibly his residence or medical office. He would have had a forensic footprint. And today, that footprint would have been inescapable. In 1935 to 1938, Eliot Ness would have had Sweeney submit to 2 polygraphs, which he failed, right? And then he would have had him involuntarily committed, all without charges or formal arrest. But that would never fly today. Miranda rights would be read before any custodial interrogation. Polygraphs would be inadmissible in most courts. Unlawful detention or commitment could lead to suppression of evidence or civil rights lawsuits. Involuntary commitment now requires a formal psychiatric hold process, expert evaluations, due process rights. Ness's secret vendetta would likely be deemed prosecutorial misconduct today. So if the trial had been brought in 2025, the case would be complex but not impossible. The DA would likely use expert forensic pathologists to highlight the surgical nature of the dismemberment. Behavioral profilers would argue signature-based links between the victims. Historical evidence from Sweeney's medical practice, his writings, his letters to Ness. There would be statements or confessions, if obtained lawfully, but prosecutors would also face challenges. There were no surviving witnesses, for one. There was a lack of preserved physical evidence. There were mental health mitigating factors. There was public sympathy for a mentally ill veteran with no prior convictions. But if convicted today, Sweeney would possibly have faced life imprisonment without parole, or the death penalty, depending what state he was in. Commitment to a higher security forensic hospital, depending on the verdict. If Dr. Francis Sweeney were prosecuted today, he'd be given full constitutional protections. His psychiatric illness would dominate the legal strategy. His treatment would likely be more humane, but the outcome no less serious. Thanks for listening to Crime Stands Still Deep Cuts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow. And if you want to learn more about profiling and how I came about it, check out my book, Surviving a Psychopath, In Court, in Life, and in Love, available on Amazon and wherever you buy books. Thanks for listening. Until next time. And remember, for victims, crime stands still.